All right, we are back on Play It Forward with Alan Post, Sanchez, writer, director, filmmaker of Watcher. Alan, thanks for being on the show.
Oh no, I'm glad. I'm very glad to be here.
We appreciate having you. Watcher, kind of a horror flick. There's definitely some comedic elements to it. Would you like to introduce yourself and or the film prior to asking three questions?
Oh yeah, yeah. My name's Alan Poe Sanchez. I am a filmmaker that started making films since he was 10 years old.
Wow.
Self-taught a little bit, but started for filmmaking at 10. Started writing at 6, and then from there, luckily I was able to go to high school, and there's like the first ever film program there, and started actually honing my skills a little bit early from high school. Got the first letterman there, and then I went off to college and graduated, and uh, I got pushed into TV production. So I graduated TV production and ended up in the industry a little bit, and then I kind of felt like TV was killing me a little bit in terms of reality television because I got pushed into that, and I decided to kind of branch off and do my own stuff, and luckily I was able to produce a few of my own short projects, and which is you know as you know, you grow as with muscle. It's like a muscle, it grows and grows, and eventually left to do my recent project Watcher. It's like, which I feel like is like night and day compared to my first short years ago. But yeah, and now I'm here.
Cool. Awesome. Watcher, first question, play it forward. Where did that kernel at seed the inspiration where you're like, the earliest notion that you can remember of like, whoa, okay, I want to turn this into a project?
Yeah, it was during like a break time. I remember in November, in between productions, and I was kind of really burnt out from again working in reality, and I was I think it was like Thanksgiving break, doing absolutely like the most nothing you can do, just sitting there in like a blank space. And I just remember thinking, okay, well, I did another short called Banshee Avalon, and it was a whole different process, more of a drama. And I realized, growing up, I was known as like a kid that grew up on horror and that genre. And it dawned on me that I've never really done a project that was horror based, and it surprised me, and then I realized why. Um, it was because I was kind of afraid of doing one because I didn't want to do injustice to a genre that I loved, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't a typical horror movie. I wanted to have its own little voice in terms of like the concept, and I think that's why it took me so long. And in between a session, this is the most random thing, but in between a session of me and my friends on our break, what we were playing a video game called Grand Theft Auto 5. And there's a mode in the online game where you could plan a heist. And we were playing that, and it kind of triggered like, you know what would be fun is to do a heist movie. I think that would be great. But then I was like, there's been so many heist movies too. And as a person, I tend to like to Frankenstein things, so I didn't want to be like another heist movie. So I started just it just dawned from it just grew from there, and I was like, okay, well, what's an interesting point that we can go from? And then I was like, well, what if there, I don't know if you remember a commercial from T-Mobile where, or I think it was like a cell phone company, where it starts off as like the ending of a comedy romance movie where the guy's running to an airplane to a woman, they go professes love to a girl, and they drive off in a car, and they're driving through the woods, going back home, and she starts coughing, feeling sick, and then it turns into a horror movie, and it turns into like this whole different thing. And it's a T-Mobile commercial, something. Well, it was random, and I was like, I kind of want to do a thing where it starts off as one thing, and then it just goes into another thing. And so I took the heist. I was like, well, what if were about to ride off into the sunset at the end of that heist? Everything goes wrong, but they're able to get out. And I was like, well, what if they do something and we take these characters from a heist movie and have them interact with something from the horror world? It's like, and it kind of then from there, that was the seed to be like, okay, it's not gonna be something physical. Let's do something more spiritual and have them react to it. And I was like, okay, there's my playground, my sandbox. This now it's time to build this thing, and that was the foundation. So from that point on, it just became what eventually is Watcher.
Cool. You know, there's like all there's similar stories in these creative like fruition moments for artists, and they come with these like bits and elements that they kind of like plot together and configure in their own way. And then there's the element which is configuring these things and putting it together, which is you and your spirit and your particular predilection and interests and talents, and it packages it into this narrative arc.
Mhm.
And so, which has a message and has a theme. And the thing that's putting these things together around this like nucleus, right? So you're like, you kind of described all these elements that you're putting around this nucleus. And this nucleus has this thematic element of kind of like this pulling some grand um action off, and this in this case it happens to be illicit, but that's not illegal and doesn't necessarily, but this pulling of this big kind of caper off and then being stranded in the woods and getting gobbled up essentially in some metaphorical way. So that kind of, like, to me, that configuration is like, well, how did you get there?
Yeah.
What in your life made you want to, like, can you even speculate? I don't know what that might be.
In terms of like the switch up, or in terms of like me.
No, like the whole thing, like, why that? Like, what is it, that you find interest in that, going that route and bringing those elements together and kind of putting this
Oh,
thematic thing together?
yeah. I mean, growing up since I was a kid, I was a person that loved. Again, I grew up on horror movies, but I wasn't just a horror hound as a kid. I also watched Disney movies and just different things. So I was absorbed in like a bit of everything in film. But the one things that intrigues me, I think, even from a young age, was the artists of like John Carpenter and Wes Craven. They're artists that take one thing and and kind of Frankenstein it into another thing, and make it work. And even one of the things that really kind of dawned on me, I was like, I haven't seen this movie in a while, and it'd be really well. There was one that came out recently, but like in terms of the genre switch up, I haven't seen one that kind of twisted that hard since the first Predator. And I remember seeing the movie like, oh my god, this is an action movie, and then at that midway point, it just becomes its opposite story of survival against this element. And that was, I think, something that drawn to me as an artist, in terms of just just leading the audience into something unknown when they're comfortable.
Mm,
And it's, to me, the most fun to take them on that journey.
mm, mm.
And with Watchers, just like, yeah, they think there's gonna be this way, but it's gonna go this way and a little bit more. It's like a slingshot. I'm kind of like building that slingshot in slingshot. Then when I shoot it, they're just gonna be holding on for dear life until it lands or it hits. And it's just, yeah, it's just from the influences of just growing up with these filmmakers that tend to twist the knife on the genre. Again, like with Wes Craven, who was known for like his exploitation work with Last House on the Left, to slashers like Nightmare on Elm Street. He got known as a horror guy, but then he switched it up with, when the time when it's getting fatigued, he started doing something different. Started with New Nightmare, where it started to become more satire, and then that was like the first stepping stone before Scream, which became this full on tilt of like playing against everything that what everybody knew. And I tend to love that type of thing, where I don't really want to go safe. I
I
want
get
to
it.
be
I get
weird.
it. Yeah, there's something in you that really resonates with playing with people's expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah, expectations in life and what they expect you to be or seem like and what you or life is really like.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's cool. The second question is the message. Now, film is done. You're a viewer. You're watching the movie. What do you think the message of the movie is?
Yeah. So the message I think is uh man, it's interesting with Watcher, because ultimately I think I know what it is, because the monster is kind of giving the message subtly, and that's, don't play to your own greed, be giving. Because if you notice, all when they're in the bonfire scene, they're talking about what they're gonna do with the money, and the only one that wasn't thinking about themselves was Sybil, the main character, who's mainly doing it for her sister. She didn't really want to do this heist, but she has to do it because, again, the system, that was happening with her failed her, and she has to go through this crazy thing just to save the one person that she loves, while everybody was kind of about themselves, even though some people, were more team based, but again, ultimately in their heart, it's greed.
Yeah,
And and I think in a world where there's a lot of greed, um if you're more giving, it's more rewarding than being self-centered. And that's something that I think is just something that came from my childhood. It's just my dad and my mom were, I agree, the most giving people, the most kind-hearted people, and I think that was something that they tend to keep me grounded as much as possible. As even when I talk about like certain successes, they're just like, yeah, great, just keep it going, but don't get, you know big headed. And so that's one thing that I think I hope the audience catch on to that. Despite this, despite the whole people loving the horror stuff, it's just I hope they get that little subtleness of that message, and it is given across. It's just more of like, it's very subtle.
yeah, no, I definitely noticed that that person was the only one who survived. And, as I'm hearing you talk, it's very much, greed is a monster. They call it, what's envy, the green headed monster or something like that, jealousy, whatever. So, greed can be monstrous in real life. And that can and has been definitely horrific, you know. And the fact that this person is the only person who survives, it definitely resonates that there is some, karmic justice that's being played out in this cycle.
Yeah,
So, cool.
yeah. It's what's funny is that I made in this, because I have when I was developing this thing, I made a kind of a monster rule book. Um, and I know how it operates, and there's a reason why, again, it is explained, like the greed thing, why this thing operates. And it's not just because like it was watching through the woods, um explaining like watching through them, like through the bonfire. It's more of like, um it's kind of sees through their souls, and it kind of sees what they truly are. And if it's corrupted, it'll take you.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great metaphor. I mean, it's definitely this element of poetic natural justice and natural law that's inherent in, what happens as consequences of our actions. And when we act in a greedy, aggressive fashion, it does come back to you, you know. And it's, something as I was jotting down in the notes, it's unforeseen, this invisible element, it's people when they first maybe begin to play with their selfishness or that greed, they don't necessarily as young people see the damage that they're doing to themselves until it's too
Yeah,
late and they're in
it, it's
pain.
it's what's funny is that it's like almost like a drug. Once you start it, and you're like, oh, I could get away with this, and then it grows, but then you start getting more. I think to me, they start getting worse about it, but also more sloppy about it, and then it just becomes a seed where it's never gonna go away, like this greed or whatever they do.
Yeah.
it's just this monster inside of them that just grows and grows unless they catch themselves like, oh, I am, you know, in the wrong here and I need to correct myself. And I, again, I think, as with anybody in life, you know, I've seen people in my life that have gone that route and done some really shady stuff, and it does come back to them because you can start catching on the traits of
Yeah,
like, kind of like even like an addiction. It's just like you could catch on the traits
yeah,
and realize something's not right. They weren't that, they're not the same person anymore. It changes them.
right, right. Yeah, I think that's a really perceptive thing to, say and realize, and is that it can become an addictive quality that leads to, the personality trait of a narcissist,
Yeah.
and that's,
And they already think they're right too. And
right. Yeah.
like, oh, I'm doing it because I need to support myself, or I need to do. I feel like it's helping me, but ultimately it's hurting everybody else or whatever they're doing.
And
And
themselves.
yeah,
And they become isolated, trapped and imprisoned and essentially haunted,
yeah,
as in your, a movie.
yeah.
Um, Alan, last question, play it forward. Since making Watcher, how have you been changed as a person?
I I have. What's funny is that Watcher was written during a weird time in my life. Again, I was kind of fatigued on work, and then 2020 happened, and that was when I was working on Watcher. It was like that during that downtime, but it was during a time when I was like severely depressed and was very like just on like the very low. And I kind of just sat there and was like, what am I going to do next? Like literally, I think my career, because again, there's nothing hiring in the industry anymore. There's nothing. It was just at a standstill. So like everybody's stuck. But then you start worrying about the future. Like what? Okay, what? How am I gonna land myself back in? Because with this industry that we have, once you're gone for a second, you could be easily replaced. Um, and so I was like, you know what? If I'm gonna do another short, I kind of have to go all out and not be afraid of the jump that the risk, the financial risk, and also just the how the reception is going to be. Like it could be like the worst. You have like the biggest budget and have the worst piece of shit that it could make. That's also really scary too. Like you don't know how it's going to translate, right? And so I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do one last short and gonna do it, I'm just gonna go all out and just go go hard. And I did. It took 2 years to do it. I finished in 2022 from 2020, and it changed me in terms of I got out of this rut, and I am now in a better state of mind from like this severe depression that I had, and realized that, oh, I still have this skill set. Because it's always about being afraid of losing those skills, because you after a while you're just like, can I still do it? Can I? And just seeing the overall reception of the film, it kind of became this newfound groove back, like getting my groove back in things. And now I feel like I'm more focused than ever, than being more unsure than of myself, of being like, all right, I'm not sure if I can make it. Now I'm like, okay, well, I'm able to be more confident in what I need to do. And um luckily with like this, this film has made me open more doors of meeting more people and open to more collaboration. So now I'm like, okay, now I have all these people that, I now that are my colleagues, that I'm really stoked to, down the road maybe work with, or uh have them work with me. It's just this collaboration thing. Now it's just like, okay, well, I think I made this right choice. Instead of being afraid of making this jump, I'm more of like, okay, let's do some more crazy jumps and see what happens.
That's awesome. I love that. Alan Poe Sanchez, filmmaker, writer, director, watcher. Not only can you do it, but you did it. Thank you so much for being on Play It Forward today. Really appreciate you, and keep up doing it. And I want to see more stuff.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. It was an honor to be here, and I was glad to be able to chat some deep feels up in film.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Nominated by Christine Solozzi. Thank you so much, Christine. Play it forward. Till next time, everybody. Peace. Thank you for checking us out.